It's amusing how a single phone call can neatly divide your existence into a before and a after. Before, I was simply Ruby Harper, a woman who found solace in the quiet hum of a server room and clean code. Later, I was still Ruby Harper. However, the world perceived me in a different light. More importantly, I developed a new perspective on myself. The call was received on a Tuesday, a gray and unremarkable afternoon that typically blends into the background of a busy existence. I was attempting to resolve a particularly vexing problem by gazing at a line of code when my assistant interrupted me. "Mr. Richard Brooks is the first person in line for you, Miss Harper." I squint, attempting to extricate myself from the digital matrix. Richard Brooks, the CEO of Brooks Manufacturing, one of Harper Innovation's most significant and earliest clients. He was a traditionalist, a man whose handshake was his bond, and I had always held him in high regard. "Sarah, please pass him through." His voice was warm and familiar as it bellowed. "Ruby, I trust that I am not interrupting you at an inopportune moment." And never, "Richard, what can I do to assist you?" "It is not directly related to business," he chuckled. "It is a bit more personal. Nathan, my son, has returned to the city. He is a clever and kind young man, however. He has been inconsistent since completing his MBA. I was hopeful that you would allow me to introduce you too. I believe you would have a wonderful rapport." I reclined in my leather chair, allowing a gentle smile to unfold on my face. This was unanticipated. Richard was acquainted with me as the president of Harper Innovations, a forthright businesswoman who had established her organization from the ground up. He held my intellect and motivation in high regard. "However, a matchmaker? That was novel," I replied. "Richard, I am flattered. However, I am uncertain as to whether I am the category of individual who is typically associated with dating." "That is absurd," he maintained. "Your workload is excessive. Nathan requires an individual who is composed and has a sound mind. You would be a greatly beneficial influence. Dinner has been served. What is your response?" I found something in his plea that struck a chord with me. Perhaps it was the fatherly concern, or it could have been the straightforward fact that my social life consisted of myself, my cat, and a rotating cast of food delivery drivers. "All right, Richard, for your benefit, a single dinner." However, as soon as I terminated the call, a pernicious notion emerged. Richard recognized me as the leader of a technology company that was worth several $1,000,000. However, what about his son, Nathan? He did not recognize me from Adam. For years, I had to navigate a world in which my title preceded me, and men were either intimidated by my success or drawn to it for all the wrong reasons. What if, for a change, I could simply embody Ruby? Not the president, not the tech magnate. I am merely a woman who is meeting with a man. I made a decision immediately. I would refrain from fabricating information. However, I would exclude it. I would allow him to believe that I was merely a mid-level project manager at an anonymous technology company. It was a social experiment, a small evaluation. I was interested in determining the true nature of Nathan Brooks and his family, as they believed they were interacting with an individual who was perceived as average. I was unaware that this straightforward, almost frivolous decision would serve as the opening move in a chess game that I was unaware I was participating in. On our initial date, we dined at a fashionable downtown restaurant that served small portions on large plates. I was dressed in a simple yet elegant black dress that was appropriate for the venue, but not so costly that it would be overtly CEO. I assured myself that I was dedicating myself to the position. I arrived a few minutes early. Nathan entered the room, and I must confess that he was quite handsome. Tall, with a perfectly coiffed hairstyle and a relaxed smile that suggested an existence devoid of any genuine adversity. He was attentive and charming, and he chuckled at all of my jokes. He discussed his travels, his vague aspirations to do something big, and inquired about my occupation. I replied, I am a project manager, but the terms were unfamiliar to me. I am employed by a technology consulting firm located in the heart of the city. We assist enterprises in optimizing their operations." "Oh, that's neat," he exclaimed, his eyes briefly dissolving before his attractive smile resumed. "There must be a significant number of spreadsheets and other documents, right?" I laughed, playing along, and said, "You have no idea." He discussed his family, with a particular emphasis on his mother, Diane. He spoke of her with a reverent reverence that was slightly unsettling for a 42-year-old man. He would remark, "Mom has impeccable taste." It was as if his own opinions were still awaiting her approval before they could be fully formulated. "Mom says a man is judged by the shoes he wears. Mom thinks modern art is a scam." The evening was enjoyable, despite the minor red flags. He was a proficient interlocutor, provided that the conversation remained superficial. And perhaps, just maybe, I was wary of being alone. I responded affirmatively when he extended another invitation to go out. The following months were characterized by a flurry of weekend excursions, engagements, and movies. I discovered that I was settling into a routine that was both comforting and familiar. It was enjoyable to have a companion to converse with and to share the minor moments with. I meticulously upheld my cover, constructing an entire persona around Ruby, the project manager. I discussed office politics that I had overheard from my own employees, expressed my dissatisfaction with my fictional, demanding supervisor, and discussed the process of saving for a down payment on a modest condominium. Nathan appeared to appreciate this incarnation of me. He treated me with a form of benevolent condescension, as if I were a prize he had won. He delighted to introduce me to his friends. "This is Ruby," he would say, draping an arm around my shoulders with a sense of ownership. "She is employed in the technology sector." He was expressing that she was unlike the other ambitious women, as she was extremely intelligent but completely down to earth. She is secure. The initial encounter with Diane Brooks was akin to entering a frigid chamber. She was impeccably attired, and her countenance was a facade of courteous indifference. We convened for brunch at the family's country club, where the staff operated with a quiet, fearful efficiency. She examined me from head to toe, her attention fixed on my dress, which I had deliberately selected from a department store. Her voice was saturated with manufactured sweetness as she said, "So, Ruby, Nathan informs us that you are employed in the field of computers." "That is accurate, Diane. I am a project manager." "How wonderful for you," she exclaimed, taking a delicate sip of her mimosa. "It must be immensely fulfilling to have a small career that keeps you occupied." Nathan simply smiled, seemingly unaware. "Isn't she wonderful, Mother? She is not one of those women who is perpetually discussing work, work, work." I simply grinned, albeit a tight, forced smile. The game was becoming less enjoyable and more enlightening. A few months later, the fractures began to become more apparent. Nathan unexpectedly drew me into a high-end jewelry store as we strolled by. He was like a child in a candy store, pointing at watches that cost more than my first vehicle. He ultimately purchased a gold watch that was excessively conspicuous, spending thousands of dollars without hesitation. A small token of appreciation for myself, he replied with a shrug. I discussed my personal circumstances later that day as part of my ongoing performance. I nonchalantly stated, "I am endeavoring to be more disciplined with my finances. I am endeavoring to accumulate my savings." Nathan touched my hand. His words were a perfect echo of a 1950s sitcom spouse, as he said, "Don't you worry your pretty little head about that. That is the purpose of men. You will not be required to consider money at all once we are married." He had never previously addressed the subject of matrimony. It hung in the air between us, weighty and emitting a faint scent of his mother's perfume. The proposal occurred 1 month later, during a visit to a vineyard that he had reserved. I imagine it was romantic. He got down on one knee with a ring that was admittedly breathtaking as the sun was setting and the wine was flowing. A large, flawless diamond that must have cost a fortune. The moment engulfed a portion of me, the solitary part that had labored tirelessly for decades. I responded in the affirmative. "What are you doing?" Screamed a small, silent voice in the back of my head. "But I suppressed it. I assured myself that I could make this work. I have the capacity to develop feelings for this individual, regardless of his imperfections. Upon our return, he insisted on immediately traveling to his parents' residence to inform them of the news. Richard was ecstatic, embracing me firmly and extending a warm welcome to the family. Diane was less enthusiastic. She turned my hand over under the light to examine the ring. I suppose it's a lovely starter ring, she sniffed. We can always upgrade it for the wedding. Afterward, she turned to me, her eyes resembling ice crystals. We must address your employment situation now. That you will be a Brooks, she stated, her voice subdued and conspiratorial. Nathan, I urge you to inform her. Nathan avoided my gaze, shifted uncomfortably. Well, honey, Mom and I were conversing, and we were just thinking it would be inappropriate for the wife of Nathan Brooks to be employed in a 9-to-5 job. You will be responsible for organizing charity concerts and attending social events. You will be unable to devote time to spreadsheets and other tasks. I gazed at him, and my blood froze into icy water. It was not a query. It was a declaration, a condition of my surrender. He had just proposed to spend the remainder of his life with me, and his first act as my fat guy was to inform me that my life as I knew it was ended. I said, my voice perilously calm, let me clarify this. You anticipate that I will resign from my position. Diane smiled as if she were presenting me with a gift, and she responded, of course, dear. You will be exceedingly preoccupied with your role as Mrs. Brooks. I gazed at Nathan, anticipating his response, whether it be to defend me, to assert that it was merely a suggestion, or to say anything at all. He remained motionless, gazing helplessly from me to his mother, like a puppet with entwined strings. In the vast, silent room, I declared, Noba. The word was a small, unyielding stone. I implore your forgiveness. Danny's smile was shaky. I declined. I will not be resigning from my position. The silence that ensued was oppressive and pervasive. Nathan, who had finally discovered his voice, hastened to reconcile the situation. My dear, let us not act hastily. We can discuss this matter at a later time. It was merely an idea. He glanced at his mother with apprehension. He apologized throughout the entire journey home. I am deeply sorry, my dear. It would have been prudent for me to consult with you initially. Your mother may exhibit a certain amount of antiquated behavior. Certainly, you are not obligated to give up. I admire your independence. The tone of his voice was one of sincerity. He appeared to be genuine, and because I had already invested so much, I allowed him to persuade me that it was all a misunderstanding, and I wanted to believe him. I permitted him to reposition the stunning, substantial ring onto my finger. It resembled a shackle. Diane and Richard were to host the grandest event of the season at their expansive estate for the engagement celebration. It was, as Diane had repeatedly stated, an opportunity to officially introduce you to our circle. The implication was evident it was my final audition. I selected my attire with military precision. Elegant and understated, it was a deep sapphire blue. It was also a discreet act of rebellion from a high-end designer, which I was aware only I would appreciate. Nathan whistled when he scooped me up. Ruby, that is truly remarkable. You maintain a tidy appearance. That must have cost you an entire month's salary, right? Intended it as a compliment. I simply grinned. Exactly as I had anticipated, the soiree was pretentious. The air was thick with the presence of costly perfume and a quiet sense of judgment. The latest excursion to the Hamptons was the topic of conversation among the wives, who were adorned in jewels, while the men, who were dressed in tailored suits, discussed stocks and mergers. I experienced the sensation of being an anthropologist conducting research on an unfamiliar, extraterrestrial tribe. I endeavored to engage in conversation, however, each exchange was fraught with puerile. Rose, what are you currently engaged in? One woman inquired, her eyes examining me in search of a brand name she could identify. For the 10th time, I responded, I am a project manager in the technology sector. How charming. She smiled and moved away. Nathan, in his element, was a social butterfly, flitting from group to group. accepting congratulations and reveling in the spotlight. He would introduce me, provide a succinct, effusive account of my sweet, down-to-earth demeanor, and subsequently become entangled in a conversation that always excluded me. I spent the majority of the initial hour standing awkwardly by the champagne fountain, nursing a single tumbler. Richard was the sole individual who made a sincere effort. He approached with a look of apprehension on his face. "Ruby, are you feeling well? You appear to be lost." "I am simply absorbing it all, Richard. It is a substantial amount." He lowered his voice and said, "Do not worry about them. They are a group of vultures. Your little digit contains more substance than all of them combined. I am overjoyed that you will be a member of this family. Nathan requires your assistance." Although his words were a small solace, they were soon overshadowed by the events that followed. Diane summoned the attention of all present by using a spoon to clink a crystal tumbler. She stood on a small, makeshift stage, holding a microphone, and the audience fell silent. Nathan, who was gleaming like a proud schoolboy, stood beside her. She began, "Darlings, I am grateful for your attendance." Her voice was as silky as silk. "As you are aware, we are present to commemorate the engagement of my dear son, Nathan, to his lovely fiancée, Ruby." She paused and her gaze fell upon me as she perused the assemblage. Her lips were adorned with a small, malicious smile. I was initially apprehensive when Nathan first disclosed Ruby to me. "She is not from our world, as you may have surmised. She is a straightforward individual with a straightforward occupation. However, she has brought immense joy to Nathan. And what more could a mother seek?" The condescension was so dense that I could have choked on it. Individuals were experiencing discomfort as they shifted. I could sense the presence of dozens of pairs of eyes on me, a combination of gullish curiosity and pity. Diane continued, her voice adopting a histrionic, pitying quality. "And Ruby has been making such an effort to assimilate. She even acquired a new dress for tonight. She informed Nathan that she had been saving for months in order to purchase it. Isn't that the most delightful thing?" I experienced a chill in my body. He had informed her of this. He had taken my joke, my silly cover story, and fed it to his mother as a piece of entertaining gossip. However, she was not yet finished. She retrieved a bottle of crimson wine from a nearby table. "I would like to propose a toast," she stated as she left the stage and made her way through the audience directly toward me. The visitors dispersed in a manner reminiscent of the Red Sea. "To Ruby, for applying herself to the fullest. We are aware that it must be a difficult situation for you, my beloved." The entirety of this. Her eyes were now gleaming with malice, and she was standing in front of me. "Permit me to offer you a small piece of advice," she murmured, ensuring that only I could hear her. "A donkey may be dressed in a designer dress, but it remains a donkey." She then appended the entire bottle of red wine down the front of my sapphire blue dress with a twist of her wrist. The audience erupted in gasps. The fabric was stained with a sticky, unsightly dark crimson liquid. The world appeared to slow down for a brief period. I could hear the sound of wine dripping repeatedly onto the marble floor. I could sense the cold liquid seeping through my epidermis. I ignored her in my pursuit of Nathan. I required his assistance. I required him to intervene on my behalf, to provide me with protection, and to inform his mother that she had exceeded her bounds. Our gazes intersected across the room. Additionally, he did nothing. He stood motionless, adjacent to the stage, his expression of surprise gradually transitioning into a sneer. Afterward, he burst into laughter. It was not a boisterous chuckle. It was a quiet, nervous giggle, a sound of complicity. He shared in his mother's laughter. In that singular, soul-crushing moment, every doubt I had harbored, every red flag I had disregarded, and every small voice I had silenced, all came crashing down on me. The game had concluded. The results of the experiment had been obtained. The outcome was catastrophic. He was not merely a vulnerable individual. He was a vicious individual. Additionally, he was the offspring of his mother. I felt as though something within me had cracked. The humiliation and the pain were all distilled into a single, unwavering point of frigid, unadulterated clarity. The music had ceased. The entire party was gazing at me, this wine-soaked spectacle, and anticipating my reaction, whether it be to cry, shriek, or flee. I did not engage in any of those activities. I collected a flute of champagne from the tray of a steward who was passing by in a composed manner. I took a small drink, my gaze never straying from Diane's triumphant expression. "I am grateful, Diane," I replied, my voice resonating throughout the silent room. "I am grateful for your assistance in simplifying this process." Nathan, who had ceased to chuckle, was now looking perplexed. I directed my attention to him. "And I am grateful, Nathan, to have demonstrated your true nature to me prior to my making the most significant error of my life." I removed the diamond ring from my finger. The sensation was delightfully airy. I approached him, and the crowd parted once more to allow me to pass. I refrained from gazing at his visage. I examined his chest compartment. I deposited the ring into the pocket of his tailored suit. I had never heard a sound as sweet as the minuscule clink it made against his cufflinks. I then returned to the chamber, where I observed the silent, expressionless faces. My name is Ruby Harper. For those of you who are unfamiliar with me, my voice resonated with a power that they had never known before. Also, I am not a project manager. Richard Brooks and I both locked gaze. I observed the horror that gradually emerged on his countenance as he began to comprehend the situation. "I am the president and founder of Harper Innovations. Brooks Manufacturing's entire manufacturing and logistics software is presently managed by the technology company that redesigned it, a company that has maintained your business's profitability for the past 8 years and possesses the key patents on the technology." The room emitted a collective groan. Diane's visage was devoid of any color. Nathan appeared to have been struck. I continued, my voice as frigid and sharp as a shard of glass. "Our contract is up for renewal next month. I had intended to execute an additional 10-year extension. However, I have experienced a change of heart." I extracted my smartphone. Speaking to my assistant, who I was aware would be anticipating my call, I began with, "Sarah, Protocol Phoenix. Execute immediately." Her voice responded with a brisk, "Consider it done, Ms. Harper." I terminated the conversation. Protocol Phoenix, I explained to the motionless, gaping audience, a contingency plan that I developed in anticipation of the dissolution of a significant client partnership. As of 30 seconds ago, a team of my lawyers has served an immediate termination of all contracts and licensing agreements with Brooks Manufacturing, citing a transgression of professional conduct and irreconcilable ethical differences with the company's leadership. I turned to Richard, who was now wearing an ashen gray complexion. "I apologize for the situation, Richard. I am sincere. You were an excellent professional partner, but your family has a character deficit that no amount of money can rectify." I then observed Diane and Nathan, who were fixed in place, resembling statues in a dilapidated museum. "I see, Diane, you were correct in one respect," I replied, allowing a gradual, sincere smile to emerge from my lips. "The situation is overwhelming. Assuming a persona that is not one's own, it is recommended that you attempt it at some point." "I see. It is unnecessary for you to do so, due to the fact that in approximately 6 months, you will discover your true identity when you are compelled to sell your home and all of your possessions due to the bankruptcy of your company." I conducted one final examination of them, the expressions of horror and astonishment, the exquisite room that abruptly assumed an unappealing and garish appearance, the unsightly red stain on my dress that had become a badge of honor. I turned and strode out without saying another word. Every eye in the room was fixed on my back. However, for the first time in months, I experienced an absolute sense of liberation. I did not glance back as I walked down the long, manicured driveway, and the cool night air hit my face. Not a single time. I had accurately forecasted the outcome. However, it transpired at a faster pace. Brooks Manufacturing was akin to a body lacking a skeleton in the absence of our proprietary software. Their production lines came to a complete stop. Chaos ensued in their logistics. Orders were overlooked. Clients fled. They filed for bankruptcy within 4 months after their stock price plummeted. The news was widely disseminated in the business journals. Richard, to his credit, made an effort to salvage what he could. One time, he contacted me, his voice resonant with defeat. He did not request that I reconsider. He has just provided an apology. For his wife, for his son, and for his own blindness, I accepted his contrition and extended my best wishes to him. Subsequently, I learned that he divorced Diane and relocated to a smaller town in order to lead a more tranquil existence, ultimately free from her influence. Nathan and Diane did not fare as well. Everything they owned was forfeited: the country club membership, the vehicles, and the estate. The irony was not lost on me when I heard that Diane was employed as a personal shopper at a high-end department store, and Nathan was struggling to maintain an entry-level sales position last I heard. He was required to acquire the skills of budgeting, laundry, and adulthood at the age of 43. The instant the money arrived, their circle of friends dissipated. It was a period of profound development for me in the subsequent 3 years. Harper Innovations experienced a significant spike in growth. We acquired the remaining market share of Brooks Manufacturing, resulting in a threefold increase in our company's valuation. However, my personal success was even more significant. I sold a minority stake in my company for a sum that guaranteed my financial independence for the remainder of my life. Additionally, I promoted my exceptional COO to assume responsibility for the day-to-day operations, which enabled me to step back and finally breathe. I rediscovered the items that I had previously cherished. I resumed hiking, confronting mountains that strained my physical capabilities and refocused my mind. I contemplated evening while standing atop a mountain in the Rockies, with the world extending below me. However, I did not experience any feelings of resentment or remorse. I experienced a profound, enduring tranquility. Additionally, I initiated volunteer work. I instruct underprivileged children in computing at a nearby community center on the weekends. The delight I experience when I witness their eyes light up as they write their first line of code, when they realize they have the ability to create something from nothing, surpasses that of any business transaction. I never again engaged in a romantic relationship with a man who was unaware of my identity. I discovered that my success is an inherent aspect of my identity and should not be concealed or embarrassed of. It is a testament to my passion, resilience, and the memory of my late brother, whose ambition of establishing this company I successfully carried out. At times, I observe a young girl in the rear of the classroom who is quiet but is incredibly intelligent. Her brow is furrowed in concentration as I stand in front of the children. I perceive myself in her. I make a silent commitment to the woman I have become and to her. Never allow anyone to make you feel insignificant. Their assessment does not establish your value. You have forged it in your own flames. I came to the realization that my fire was only beginning to ignite.